no matter what life you are born into, at any moment you can decide, I want to become a better version of myself. I want to change for the better. And you could just work and show up every day, regardless of how much you want to, regardless of how much you feel like you need to, just keep showing up and keep working towards becoming a better version of yourself. And it reminds me of a quote I actually heard you say one time, where it's, you have your head down and you're chopping away for so long, and you don't really understand how much you've accomplished until you lift your head up and realize you've cut down a whole forest. And crossing that finish line was that moment of looking up and realizing how far I had come from those times that I just really struggled.
In those years leading up to today, when you were chopping and saw very little to no growth or change, what kept you chopping?
I think it was just the belief that I continued to tell myself that I wanted to have a bigger effect on my own life than just those immediately around me. There was always just something inside of me that was like, I want to have a big effect on people. I want to be someone that others can turn to and find inspiration in.
Luke Hopkins, welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be back.
You got some new titles in your resume now.
Yeah, the Instagram bio just got a little bit longer. I just completed Ironman Wisconsin. I qualified for the World Championship in Nice, France in 2025. And as of right now, I'm ranked in the top 2% through the Ironman All-World Athlete rankings in my age group.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
How's it feel?
Pretty surreal. It still doesn't process to me because it's hard to understand what 2% of the whole world in your age group looks like. But it was a really special event, something that I worked super hard for, and it turned out better than I could have ever imagined. So really grateful for that.
How did that accomplishment change the thought of the future for triathlon for you? What you think is and believe is achievable, what you want to pursue? When you decided initially that you wanted to train for and complete an Ironman, crossing the finish line, I'm sure, was like the result. Now that's obviously evolved. How's your mindset shifted going into this next chapter, going to Worlds?
Yeah, I think it's similar to the first time you do any type of race or competition. It's daunting because it was the longest competition I've ever done up until this point. I've done a 50-mile ultra, but moving your body for damn near 11 hours straight, mentally and physically, it's extremely taxing. However, now that I've been able to complete that in like my own personal life, I realize, okay, this is possible. It's not just something that is a one-off that I got lucky that I showed up that day and it's just like, yep, I completed the race. I worked really hard for this, and this is the result I got up until this point. Now that I have my base set, I can continue to work harder. I can continue to expand my training, do these other different types of events, similar to how for a marathon, you could do a half marathon, a 10K or a 5K. For an Ironman, you can do a half Ironman, an Olympic triathlon, a sprint triathlon. So there's a number of different avenues that I can stem into. But what I've realized is I just really like triathlon training a lot because of how multifaceted it is. And it's entertaining to me to wake up and check which workouts I'm doing or which workouts I have lined up and what my focus gets to be put into for that specific day. So I've had a great time training for triathlons thus far, and it's something that I will hopefully stick with for the near future.
I'm assuming that when you first decided you were going to do an Ironman, you believed you could finish it.
Yeah, there wasn't any part of me that was like, I'm not going to cross this finish line. But I do think that with all things, we always have that self-doubt in the very back of our head that can sometimes get the best of us. If you have, say, a workout that doesn't go as good as you want it to, sometimes it's a little louder than you want it to be. But when I signed up, I had full intention of crossing the finish line. And then it just came down to next thought was, what time am I going to do it in? How are my splits going to look for the swim, the bike, the run? Where do I need to prioritize the most of my work? So that's where I began to diversify and reach out and seek help from coaches or athletes that had more experience than me, because I know something we talked about last time, but working with individuals that know more, that are better than you, are going to push you to want to learn more, to want to be better. So I'm very fortunate to have had a great training group surrounded by me. And I think those guys really pushed me from changing my mindset to just it being a completion event to being something that I could actually compete in.
One of the things I've been saying this last couple of months is that belief always comes before ability. And I actually heard this the first time on one of the Founders episodes, the Founders podcast. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it was quoted from Jay-Z and just Jay-Z's journey of becoming a superstar, a very successful artist, entrepreneur. Belief comes before ability. So obviously starting your Ironman journey, you had to have the belief that you could finish the race in order to accomplish the race. But that has been unlocked now. So I'm assuming you now have this new belief. What is the ability? Like, what do you think you are able to achieve in the future? Do you know?
I definitely don't know. And I think that's what has me so encaptured by the event itself, because I've only been truthfully training for triathlons for the past 5 months. So in the grand scheme of things, that's very short time frame. So to be at this point where I'm now preparing for a world championship in a year from now, 5 months into my training block for this, it really just fires me up, because it's like, okay, like this is where we've gotten to in this short period of time. Now you damn near double the length of training for it. And I'm working harder than I ever have before, because I realize there is potential here. And I think it ties into Ironman's main slogan, which is anything is possible. So it's not just a matter of, oh, I want to do this thing just to do it. It's now like, okay, I have a time goal set in mind. And it's not that outlandish anymore, because I realize I've already gotten to this point. So if I just work harder, if I follow these workouts, similar to any type of race or event, if you follow a structured plan, if you stick to your preparation and show up every single day, and like you said, if you have that belief that you can not only achieve it in the end, but that you could show up every single day, it all combines together, and it's this just mental and physical progression to becoming a better version of yourself.
So what's that time? What's the time you want to hit?
I wanted to do, my goal was sub 10 hours in my first full Ironman, which I think I learned very quickly. That's super aggressive. And it was a learning experience. And I think with any type of event, you go out with an aggressive goal, you shoot for the moon, and you land on a star. So now going next year around with the World Championship in France, I'd like to say 10 hours. If I didn't hit it this time, then I'm going to hit it eventually. And it's no longer this crazy idea of if I will hit it, it's when I will hit it, because anything is possible if you're willing to just keep showing up and keep working for it.
I will eventually hop into another Ironman prep again. I don't know when. I get asked that question all the time. Right now is definitely not the time with a newborn in the house, a toddler, being focused on the business. But there will be a window of time in the future where I'm like, okay, I'm going for it again. And for me, why Ironman was and is attractive, like, I'm not attracted to just triathlon. I'm attracted to Ironman.
Gotcha.
The longer distance stuff, because of the commitment required to the training, the amount of training you have to do, the efficiency you have to build in. And then, you go do the swim, you go into the bike. And by the time you get off the bike, you're, maybe 7-8 hours into this day. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to go run a marathon.
Yeah.
26.2 more miles. So when you were hopping off that bike, transitioning into the run, what was going through your mind?
I can actually tell a little story right here. I've waited to fully share this story. I've talked to a lot of people about it, but I knew that once you reached out to me about this, that it would be great. So when I was getting my bike to Wisconsin, I had to disassemble it in order to fit it into the crate that you ship it out to. So when I got to the Ironman event itself, I had one of the vendors reconstruct the bike.
Smart.
And I rented a race wheel too. So I was like, okay, I'll have one vendor reconstruct the bike, and then I'll go to the vendor that I rented the race wheel from, and I'll be all good. And this is the day before the race itself. I was like, I'll get the bike all in check. I got there at maybe 1 p.m. A bike check-in ended at 6 p.m. I was like, I have 5 hours to get everything good. I'll get a test ride, make sure the bike works well, and we'll be all set. They reconstruct the bike. I bring it up to the race wheel vendor, and he says, whoever constructed your bike did it wrong. It's like offset on a gear. You can't shift down to your lower gear. And Ironman Wisconsin had 6,200 feet of elevation, pretty hilly course. So if I wasn't going to get to my lower gear, it was going to be a very long and hard day on the bike. So I brought my bike back down, and you saying that you want to get back into Ironman is great because your bike now has a new chain and cassette. So I had to buy a new chain and cassette there. It's entirely worn, it's shot. So I said, okay, whatever. This took all day. Before I knew it, it was 5:30 p.m. and they're like, we should have your bike ready. If not, we'll check it in for you. And I kind of want to see how the bike rides, you know? But they get it to me. I didn't have time to test ride the bike. So I said, okay, I check it in. I go home. Back in my head, I'm like, I just hope that everything with the bike works properly. I hope it shifts properly. We'll be all good. Come race day, the next day, go through the swim. Swim went super well. Get to my bike. As soon as I hop on the bike, I noticed that my seat is too high. Now, it was probably, in the grand scheme of things, like 2 to 3 centimeters off. So very small. But when I've been riding that bike for over 1,000 miles in the past 7 weeks leading up to the race, I knew right away this is going to hurt. Yeah. And after 6,200 feet,
was it high or low?
Too high.
It was too high.
So after 6,200 feet of climbing and rolling hills, I got to the end and my back was just so cooked that I couldn't actually bend down to put my shoes on. One of the volunteers ended up slipping them on for me. And I remember they're like, oh, are you good? Are you going to be able to run? And I'm like, yep. Like I made it through 2/3 of the race. This is it. This is like the final part. And then, like you said, it sets in. It's a full marathon. It's not just a light jog. You are doing a full event that sometimes you spend 12 to 16 weeks of dedicated training just for this portion. And I was in so much pain. My lower back hurt so bad, but I just kept telling myself I had worked so hard to get to this point and that no matter what, I was going to finish the race. And I kept getting back to what can I control in this moment? And it was just my emotions and the way that I carried myself. So throughout the majority of the run, even though I was in crippling back pain, I was trying to smile as much as I could because I believe I might have touched on it last time, but the importance of like positive psychology and like performance. And if you see someone doing something extremely difficult and they're carrying themselves in a strong manner and they're shouting to other people, giving out high fives, it almost makes you work harder because you're like, if they're pushing through this, why can't I do it? And I realized just how taxing this event was for me. And I thought back to all the training I had done. And all I kept thinking about was, if this sucks this much for me, it's got to be pretty bad for someone. Anyone doing an Ironman probably is hurting at some point. So I made an effort during that run that no matter how much pain I was in, I was going to continue to just uplift others and focus less on the individual pain I was going through and more on how I could provide support to those around me. And I think that's what made the run a lot more bearable than it could have been, because it got to a point where I was struggling to breathe, holding a relatively easy pace for myself, but because my back was just in so much pain.
What was the lowest part of that run? Like what mile?
Maybe mile, I don't even know, 21, because it was uphill at that point, I want to say. And you're so close, you're telling yourself it's just a 5-mile run. The amount of times I've gone on a 5-mile run in my life and it's gone by like that. But then you realize it's the end of the day and you've just been working for so long. Honestly, I guess that was the lowest, but there was never any true like, am I going to like have to stop moment. I just kept telling myself like one foot in front of the other, keep going, keep pushing. And I have to give a massive shout out to the entire BPN community, because the amount of people that I saw wearing BPN hats or yelling "Go One More" at me or cheering me on while they were either spectators or volunteers or even in the race themselves. And that just kept reminding me it's we're doing something bigger than ourselves. Although this was my individual race, I was doing this to show other people that, hey, if you just work really hard and you believe in your work ethic and you believe in what you're truly trying to accomplish, you can achieve whatever you set out for.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I had that same type of experience at the California International Marathon this past December, where midway through the race, there were all these people chanting, "Go on more," BPN. You see like BPN gear and hats all over the course. And my mindset shifted midway through that race where I was thinking, yes, I originally signed up because I wanted to hit this big marathon PR. I put in all this work to accomplish that PR. But me crossing the finish line is much more than a personal achievement at the end of this day. It's to show people you can set a goal, you can work towards that goal. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is unbelievable. And you can accomplish that and you can do that. So I felt this massive obligation and responsibility halfway through that race where I have to hit this goal. Like, there is no other option. I have to hit this goal, not just to prove myself that I can do it, but to show other people, yeah, this is what happens when you put in the work.
Absolutely.
And you can do this and you can accomplish this. And I am not an exception. I am not a rarity. Everyone has the ability. Everyone has the ability if you first have the belief and you're willing to work and do it.
Absolutely. And I kept coming back to this idea a lot of being in the passenger seat of your own life. And I feel like for a while, I grew up with this mindset of being like a victim to the circumstances I was born into. This is where I live. These are the people I'm surrounded by. How do I fit into like what they want me to be? How do I just make things work? And it took an extremely long time and a lot of self-reflection to learn that this is really it. This is the only time that you and I are going to have this moment. This is the only life that we are going to have. So these things that you have, these dreams that you listen to music and visualize yourself doing or that keep you up at night, you can turn those into reality. You can step into the driver's seat and start taking control of your own life. And it's something that I've talked a lot with a lot of my friends who are just now getting into the job field after graduating college, and they're talking about how frustrated they are and how they don't like what they're doing. And all I keep getting back to is you can take control of your life. You can work really hard. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a risk. It's going to be scary, but you can change the entire direction of your life if you're willing to believe that you can do it. If you want to just take in all like that's around you and just say, hey, this is what I want to do with my life. It's not just going to be a dream that I have. I'm going to turn it into a reality. And just be a man of your word, be a woman of your word. Whatever you say, whatever you put out into the world, have action to back it up. Because you could have said, yeah, I want to run this marathon PR, but if you didn't prepare for it, if you didn't do the work for it, it's just words. There's no validation or credibility to what you're saying. If you say, I'm going to set this marathon PR, and you outwardly show all of the work that you're doing, and you know inside, like internally, that you're showing up every day, that you are working your absolute hardest, it's all going to come together exactly how it's supposed to. So that's just something that I kept getting back to, is that this is really the only life you have, and you can make it anything you want it to be, so long as you're willing to work relentlessly for it and truly believe in yourself that things are going to work out the way that they're supposed to.
I know there's a lot of people who, maybe not a lot of people, but there's probably people listening to this saying, dude, it's just a race. It's just a marathon. It's just a run. It's just an Ironman. But it's so applicable to every other aspect of life. It builds confidence. It instills belief. It reinforces ability. When you crossed the finish line and became an Ironman, did you get emotional?
Oh my God. I bawled my eyes out in the last probably quarter mile when you make that turn and you see the red carpet and you see the finish line and everyone's lined up cheering you on. I immediately started crying. And it wasn't just because I was completing a race or because my back hurt, or because I knew how much this singular event meant to me. But a big reason why I decided to do Ironman Wisconsin was because it was in September. And September is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And as someone who's had loved ones, as well as myself, been severely affected by mental health, I really wanted everything that I was doing in that moment to embody what it means to just keep showing up for yourself. That, like you said, it's a lot more than just a race. It's a lot more than just the work hits that were going into it. The mental side of things are that you're willing to keep pushing when life is pushing you back harder. You're willing to keep getting up no matter how many times you get knocked down. And I think that's what really got me emotional, because I remember walking up to my mom and I had one of the volunteers just wrapped around me. And I remember the only thing I could really say to her in the immediate moment of seeing her was like, I'm just so happy to be alive. And I think the volunteer might have thought I was being a little dramatic, that I just done an Ironman. He was like, yeah, no shit, you're alive, you're good. But what I meant by that was I was just so happy that I had decided to make this my life, that I decided to believe in myself, that I decided to put myself out into the world and just work as hard as I could to show others that no matter what life you are born into, at any moment you can decide, I want to become a better version of myself. I want to change for the better. And you could just work and show up every day, regardless of how much you want to, regardless of how much you feel like you need to, just keep showing up and keep working towards becoming a better version of yourself. And I think that's what really got me emotional, because I thought back to not just this past year, but my entire life, when I just really thought, I'm working so hard and I don't see the end. I don't see why I'm doing this. It's just like, I'm always the one that's putting all the effort, whether it be studying in the library or going and doing these workouts early morning. I just kept pushing myself really hard. And for a while, I didn't know what direction I was going towards. And it reminds me of a quote I actually heard you say one time, where it's, you have your head down and you're chopping away for so long, and you don't really understand how much you've accomplished until you lift your head up and realize you've cut down a whole forest. And crossing that finish line was that moment of looking up and realizing how far I had come from those times that I just really struggled. And having my parents there, having members of BPN there, having these absolute strangers. I had a 17-year-old kid come up to me crying harder than I was, spectator. I had no race, no family members there. He had driven 2 hours to come and see me individually. Couldn't say a word to me. And I just stood there and I hugged him. And I said, I am so proud of you. And once he was able to kind of like gather himself a little bit, he just had said to me, you have no idea the impact you have on my life. And for me as a 21-year-old kid to hear that I'm moving to someone to tears merely just by being myself and sharing my story, it's changed my perception that it's far greater than these races or these things that we share as individuals on social media. It's not just us sharing our lives, it's inspiring others that they can do the same, that they can push themselves beyond belief. And it just really means a lot to me.
I mean, it's powerful, man. It might just be a run, it might just be a race to some people, but to others, it's just revolutionary change. It's this new trajectory that brings them out of darkness and it's finally lightness in their life, and it gives them perspective and hope and faith and community and things that we need socially and individually to live a life of happiness and fulfillment. In those years leading up to today, when you were chopping and saw very little to no growth or change, what kept you chopping?
I think it was just the belief that I continued to tell myself that I wanted to have a bigger effect on my own life than just those immediately around me. I knew that I could always be a very good friend. I could always be a very good sibling, a son, but there was always just something inside of me that was like, I want to have a big effect on people. I want to be someone that others can turn to and find inspiration in. And I think it started out from a very young age when I was about 12. And after experiencing my dad, who had gone through a pretty severe accident and it had really shaken my family at its core, I looked towards my siblings and I looked towards these older adults that were saying these things like, I'm so proud of you and you're so inspiring for just being a 12-year-old kid at this time in these circumstances that you don't have control over. And I was just doing my thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to keep playing sports. I'm going to keep doing well in school. I'm going to be this person that has things as in control as possible. And I remembered that there were a lot of nights that I really regretted how many times I just put on like a smiling face, or it was just like the A-OK kid, the kid that on the surface had everything all figured out. And this continued on into high school. I was the captain of 2 sports teams. I had a full academic scholarship to college. And on the surface, I was just always this person that had things like figured out. And it took a while, but I ended up really kind of falling apart and having a conversation with my mom one night that I was just genuinely so upset with where I was in my life, because while on the surface I had been this person that had it all figured out, at least the outside eye, internally I was just very unhappy with the person I was. I was lying to myself about being proud of my accomplishments. I could just never like look at myself and say like, hey, you are the person, the version of yourself that you want to be. And I remember that was a moment, I was about 18 years old, just turned 18 years old, where I had that conversation with my mom. And I realized, if I'm feeling this at 18, there has to be other people out there that feel this way. There's definitely other individuals that are struggling with their own mental health, that are struggling to feel accomplished or feel proud of themselves for what they're doing. And that was really one of the main reasons why I went into neuroscience and psychology, because I wanted to better understand how to support others who struggled to support themselves. And as I continued to study and continued to have my involvement within those fields and within the mental health space, I just always had this desire to want to change other people's lives, to want to help other individuals by helping them better understand themselves.
How did you make the change? How did you dig out of that darkness and start becoming more proud of your accomplishments? I guess that's one part of the question. What did you change? Second part would be, what was the result of that change?
The biggest thing I did to change was to believe I could change first. For so long, I just looked at my life and said, whatever comes my way is what I'm expected, what's supposed to be mine. And it was all a series of reactions to those things, very few responses. Once I realized that I could control what I intook on a daily basis, what I can control who I interact with and who I interacted with, once I realized that all it takes is just little action on a daily basis. And this started out with reading books about self-help or listening to podcasts or developing my understanding of the physical fitness space and how I wanted to stem into there. It was just a little by little every single day. And I kept continuously telling myself, okay, it's going to get easier every day. I'm going to learn more about these things every day. I'm going to feel happier with my life every day by just continuing to show up for myself. The hard part is going to be showing up every day. So when it came to journaling, or I'm a huge whiteboard advocate, it's just, you have to put these visual reminders in front of you that, hey, things are going to get better. You just have to believe they're going to get better. Hey, things are going to get better. You just have to work for them to get better. And it was until my junior year of college that I decided, you know what, I've thought about this for a long time, but I want to step outside of my shell. I want to start sharing my life on social media. And it started out very simply. I was posting my lifts on social media, just a very small thing. And I said, I know people are going to probably have their opinions about this, but those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. So I'm going to continue to do what makes myself happy. And just day by day, week by week, it continued to compound over time, because I stayed true to my original intentions. Was I want to be someone that others can look to and find inspiration in, and realize that you can accomplish whatever you want. You can accomplish whatever you want to in life as long as you're willing to work for it. And then the result that came from it is every single thing I've experienced in the last year and a half, and just all of the good I'm surrounded by. And I always make sure to make a conscious effort of sharing how grateful I am and how appreciative I am of being right here in this very moment. Despite the discomfort I might feel sometimes during my workouts, or the frustration I might feel when I'm trying to figure out where I want to stem into next or what race I want to do next, I always just make sure I take a deep breath and remind myself, like, hey, like, this is such a blessing to be here right now. And I think just having that mindset of being truly appreciative of the present moment and realizing that I am truthfully in the driver's seat of my life right now has made me just have a greater appreciation of life, truly.
Has the act of creating content, putting your life out there for the world to praise, criticize, provide unsolicited feedback, has that made you happier, or has that led to moments of unhappiness? I guess what I'm trying to say is, social media can be a really awful place. And especially in the fitness industry. And for someone who previously might have been unhappy with the life they were living, struggled with mental health, to then put your life out there for the world to criticize and watch, that comes with a lot of good, but also comes with some bad. Have you experienced some of the bad, and has that affected your journey along the way?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it often will come in times where it depends on what you're prioritizing. If I posted a video or a photo and just like for some reason when I was sharing that, I just had the intention of it doing very well comparatively to social media, where it's like a lot of likes, a lot of comments, a lot of engagement. Oftentimes I feel like let down when it doesn't meet my expectations. However, when I share something with the sole intention of, hey, this is my life, I don't care what you have to think about it. I genuinely want to share this, regardless of how that post, that piece of content does. I genuinely am like significantly more at peace with myself, knowing that, hey, I'm not trying to be anyone else other than myself. If you like what I'm sharing, great. I appreciate you very much. If you don't like what I'm sharing, great. We just have different alignments, and that's okay. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people get caught up in with social media, is that you don't have to like everything that's shared. That there's just, it's not necessarily like good or bad either. It's just different. And I think there'll be people that get so displeased because someone just has a different opinion than them, then they outwardly project, because there's very few consequences for releasing negative feedback on social media, which is unfortunate. Like you wish there was more restrictions, but at the end of the day, someone's negative outward projection or criticism is most likely due to an internal security that they have. So if someone sees you working very hard and sharing, hey, this is the progress that I'm making, and if they feel in their life they aren't making progress, they might try and belittle you because they want to humanize you. They want you to be on the same level as them because they can't stand the idea of someone doing better than them. So if you focus solely on the people that, or if you focus solely on trying to please the people that have different opinions than you, you're going to be pretty miserable, because all your attention is going to be dedicated to those who could care less about you. Versus if you focus on the individuals that support you, that want to see you well, that say, hey, Nick, you inspired me to change my life. I lost 50 pounds because of you. Or, hey, Nick, you inspired me. I ran my first marathon. If you focus on those people, you realize, okay, this is much bigger. Like we said, this is much bigger than just my life. This is now something that people can look to as a beacon and be like, when I am struggling, when I don't know if I can accomplish something, what is Nick doing? How is he motivating me? And that's what I think people can be in this world of social media if they stay true to their core values and they share content with the sole intention of, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. If you find inspiration with it, great. If not, best of luck with whatever else you enjoy.
You have to stay true to yourself.
100%.
I think that is the only way to, as younger people growing up in this world, even older people aging in this world, the only way to survive is to be authentic, to be you, to establish your values, your beliefs, and be firm in those, and stand on those, and not be afraid to shout it from wherever you are, despite the criticism or the feedback or the hate that you get. You have to know who you are, what you believe in. I was listening to a podcast I'll probably reference a few times throughout this episode this past weekend on my long run. And it was Chris Williamson's podcast, Modern Wisdom, and Alex Hormozi was on. And one of the things they were talking about was kind of creators building these platforms online and the consequences that come with it. And Hormozi said that if you trade in your integrity for exposure, you have to be careful, because you can't buy that back. And there's a lot of people doing that, where you have a set of beliefs or values that are loose, and you throw those out the window because I'm temporarily going to go grab this exposure. I'll come back to my values and beliefs at some point. But the reality is, once you throw those values and beliefs out and you're not you anymore, and you create this persona for exposure, you cannot buy back what you threw away. Once you throw that away, there ain't coming back.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous and that's scary. But I think for a lot of younger people, hearing that, like, hey, if you're going to use these platforms, be you. Be proud of that. Like, know what you believe in, what your values are, stand firm on those, and don't let exposure or growth of these platforms dictate what you hold on to and what you throw away.
Absolutely. And I think it also comes down to sticking to your own timeline. A lot of people, like you said, they have that priority of exposure and they begin to hop on trends or working with all these different things, a little bit of a sellout, and it then thus saturates their character because they just want that instant gratification. They want that one video to just go viral, hit 1 million views, get 100,000 likes. And they're craving that short-term dopamine sensation of just that instant feedback of just, hey, people like this. Stay true to the timeline that you were intended to be on. It might take longer for you to build a community, but you will be building a community versus a following if you stay true to your core values and continue to share your story that way. And that's one thing that I am extremely grateful for is I feel like in being genuinely myself and sharing my authentic story, that people are building an actual kind of bond with this message that I'm trying to share of being an athlete is much more than just being this stoic figure that accomplishes these crazy feats, but it's about being a human being and experiencing every single aspect of life that comes with it. And people can resonate. Like I was sharing, people might reach out to you because they resonate with you as a human being and they resonate with your story. Whereas if you're all about blowing up or getting a massive following, just because someone follows you doesn't necessarily mean that they align with what you're trying to share. It could have just been one video that they thought was funny or meaningful and they decided to follow you with that. So I think that's a very big difference that if anyone out there who's looking to create content wants to go into is build a community. Don't just build a following.
So where I want to go next with this conversation is all around potential. Mm-hmm. I messaged you earlier talking about that I want to dive into this. And last week I was hitting a high rocks workout in the gym, and Ian was filming it for an upcoming campaign that we're launching. Music was off. I was kind of just in it. It was like a 70-minute high rocks, just kind of grinder. And I was getting after it, and it was just quiet. And he goes, if something's on your mind, truly on your mind during this workout, just say it. Just let it rip. So like, all right, let me think on this for a little bit. So I'm on the skier and I'm just throwing down Ks. I was throwing down Ks on the skier and the rower and the assault runner. And I'm just thinking about the work put into this prep and the miles logged, the sessions completed, the meals logged and hit and accounted for. Just everything that goes into a build and a prep. And I kept thinking about why high rocks? Like, why am I going to compete in high rocks? And it's not that I want to be a high rocks world champion. I don't sign up for marathons because I want to go to the Olympics. That'd be nice, but I don't sign up for these physical accomplishments in the pursuit of being the world's best. Some people do, and that's great. People should. You should want to be the best. But for me, I want to find, and this is why I jump from event to event to competition to competition. I want to find my potential. Like, where is it? What can I accomplish in this lifetime? How far can I push it? And as I was doing this workout with Ian filming it, I'm just thinking about potential. Like, where is this potential going to be? I don't know right now. I'll know when I'm on my deathbed. I'll look back and think, oh shit, Nick, like you did it. Like you pushed and like you really squeezed every ounce of juice out of this life to like really do some great stuff. And in the process, held on to your integrity and your beliefs and your values and did good things. Or on the flip side of that, you're on your deathbed thinking, shit, there's a lot left in the tank. I didn't take advantage of what I could do with the gifts in the talent that God gave me. And I sacrificed my integrity and values and beliefs. And as I got off the skier and I look over to Ian, who has the camera, I just started riffing on the fact that potential is achieved through the preparation. A lot of people will say, I want to do X, Y, and Z in my life. But just wanting to accomplish something does not mean you're going to achieve it. The work is how you achieve it. The preparation is how you achieve it. Preparation is how we reach our greater potential. What are your thoughts on that?
So two big things. The first one I want to hit on is what you were talking about with being the best versus just achieving your potential. And it's a really good quote that I live by. It was my senior year of high school quote from Walter Payton. And it's, when you're good at something, you'll tell everyone. When you're great at something, they'll tell you. And I think if you live your life with the sole focus of being better than other individuals, if that's the only reason why you're doing these events, if that's the only reason why you're sharing your stories because you want to be seen as above others, then no matter what you accomplish in life, when it's all said and done and you're on your deathbed, you're going to look back and think, like, all I wanted to do was just compete and like always be seen as better. Like, I was always comparing myself to other individuals, that I was never able to be present and appreciate the work I was doing.
That's so good.
Versus when you're great at something, which is something that I've really like constantly gone back and forth with, where it's like, am I trying to be better than someone just to be the best, or am I actually just sticking true to like my own journey, my own preparation, and just trying to be great? And I fell down a little bit of a rabbit hole with that with Ironman, because there's the rankings in your age group, and I had this just goal of like number one in my age group, and that was it. But then what I realized was, I'm not focused on my own race at this point. I'm focused on how other people are racing. And if I just am always caught up in what they're doing, what their swim split, what they're biking, or what they're running, I'm missing out on my own journey. I'm missing out on my own life. So shifting that perspective, shifting that narrative to, hey, I'm going to keep focusing on my own prep. I'm going to keep showing up because I know that's how I'm going to work towards becoming the best version of myself, becoming great. And I'm not going to continuously talk about the work that I'm doing or, oh yeah, I'm going to be the best. I'm not going to keep saying these things. Like you said, the goals that you have, if you just keep saying, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be the best, and you aren't backing it up with your work, it's meaningless. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Is it's not necessarily how big your goal is, it's how willing you are to work for it. And I think that's what you're saying with the preparation aspect of, you want to look back and just be proud of the fact that you gave it your all. Regardless of the outcome, you showed up for yourself and you pushed yourself as hard as you could, as opposed to how hard did I push myself compared to how did this person perform or how I could have performed. This is your life. Stay true to it. Continue to show up every single day for yourself and just focus on the idea of being great.
This past year, I caught myself really studying like 3 people to learn from what they've done and how they got to where they are or were. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Steve Jobs. Those 3 people, primarily because, as I've said a million times, I've become obsessed with this podcast called Founders this past year, hosted by David Senra. And he's obsessed with those 3 people. So he does a lot of episodes on Jordan, Kobe, and Jobs. So I've just learned naturally a lot about them and their work. And if any 3 of those people would have just either started a business and it became super successful overnight, picked up a basketball and became a champion overnight, that'd be cool. That'd feel really good. They'd have a lot of money. But would that be their full potential? Like they've reached their great potential because those were the guys at 4 a.m. while everyone else was sleeping, were in the gym, shooting hoops, putting in the work. Steve Jobs, before he would go do a presentation on a new product, would rehearse for dozens of hours prior to. the preparation where you are literally chopping wood, as we were talking about, previously, you're chopping and you're chopping and you're chopping, and you might not see progress. You don't see outcome. You don't see result. No one's praising you. But it comes a day when you're finally able to be tested, and you achieve, and you achieve again, and you achieve again, over and over and over again, not because of chance, not because of exception, not because of raw talent and skill, but because of preparation. That's where all of the result comes from. That's where all the joy comes from. That's where the fulfillment, the growth, the knowledge, the experience you pass on to generations to come. It's not the day you launch a new product. It's not the day you win a championship game or cross the finish line. It is the countless hours spent leading up to that moment, the preparation that gives you the ability to execute and reach that greater potential. That potential is not measured by other people beating someone else, but it's being the best version of you. And that's why last year we launched the brand campaign, Prove Yourself Right. Prove to yourself what you can do, not to prove others wrong. Because I've never resonated with that. And I believe that what you can do is only internally driven based off of your belief, your preparation, and your ability.
Absolutely. And I think it's also that it means so much more to you when you think about how hard you worked for it. It's a positive feedback loop, really, because if you're working really hard for a goal, you realize how much it means to you, which is going to make you work harder for your goal. So that's why when these things do come to an end, where it comes time to really, like you said with Steve Jobs, to display this new product, or with Kobe and Jordan, when it comes time for them to play in the NBA Finals, they're playing their heart out because they realized how much it means to them. And as a result, how much they prepared for it because it meant that much to them. And it's similar to the idea that, like you said, if it just happened overnight, yeah, it would feel good, but it would fade away a lot faster than if you trained every single day for years leading up to an event, or practice every single day for months leading up to a presentation, and for it to work out better than you could have ever imagined because you realize I worked my absolute hardest. I did my best, as opposed to, oh, how hard is he working, or what does his presentation look like? It's no, I focused just on my own individual journey, and I showed up every single day, that when the day finally does come for things to come to light, when you do finally lift your head up after chopping for so long, you truly appreciate not only the work that you produced, but yourself and your work ethic, because you believed you could do it, and you continued to show up and back up that belief with your actions.
And that's why it's an emotional experience.
Exactly.
That's when we cross finish lines, we break down, we cry. I've been there every time. Dude, like when I'm a mile out from finishing a marathon and I know I'm on pace and I know I'm going to hit it, this massive lump forms my throat and I'm holding it in. Mm-hmm. And that's when I just run faster. And you cross that finish line finally, and it's just like this release of every emotion. Nothing in the world matters at that point anymore. And you're not even thinking about what you just did, but the preparation leading up to. Same thing happened when I finished my Ironman and Leadville and all of these races. You break down not in what you just accomplished, but what it took to get there. It's wild.
It's truly a special feeling, because it's when the external existence of your own being fully aligns with the internal self-identity that you've formed, where it's just this point where you believed in yourself for so long that your beliefs turn into reality. And it's this, like you said, this euphoric feeling where nothing else matters in that moment, where you truly realize I am really accomplishing the things that I want to in life because I'm working so hard for them.
Yeah. I love that. I'm imagining this, like these two forces coming together, and as you cross the finish line, they merge.
It's this balance where it's just everything in life for a brief period, because obviously like feelings or results end and whatever, but it's just in that moment, it's just everything comes right in the straight line. everything aligns up at that point, and it's just like, this is who I am. I am doing exactly what I said I was supposed to be doing. This is an experience that I was meant to have, so I'm just going to be as present as I can be with it.
There's a lot of power when you say you're going to do something and it's really ambitious and bold, and then you actually go and do it. And you're like, holy crap, what else can I do?
Absolutely.
What's next? And that's why we sign up for the next race and the next challenge, and we push and we push and we push, because now we've unlocked this new part of our ability that literally nothing is impossible.
Yeah. And it's this idea of being content but not complacent, because other people might look at it and it's just like, well, you just did a race, or, oh, you just did really well, why do you want to do another? And I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of myself for the work that I've done, but I know I can work harder. I know I can achieve more because I believe I can achieve more. It's not necessarily that I just want to keep going because I want to be the best. Like we had said, like, no, it's not necessarily about being the best. It's because I know that at 21 years old, respectively, like, I can accomplish a lot more than I have up until this point. And it fuels me to continue to work. And anyone out there listening should realize that they should be extremely grateful and proud of what they've accomplished up until this point. But to be defined by your past experiences as opposed to how you can develop your present work ethic to result in future endeavors and accomplishments, that's where life is meant to be lived. If you just sit back and say, yeah, 4 or 5 years ago I ran an Ironman and that's the end of it, it's like, okay, that was great, but what are you doing now? Mm-hmm. And that's what I think more people should shift their mindset towards. It's, yes, you have this resume that you're building out of accomplishments or great experiences, and that should be used as fuel to show, this is what I've done so far. So how can I use these accomplishments, these great feelings where, I was fully aligned with the person that I wanted to be and the person I believed I could? How can I use those to fuel me to work harder, to push towards always like working towards a better version of yourself? Because the minute you're complacent with who you are as a human being is the minute you stop exposing yourself to growth. And as human beings, we're infinite. We can continuously learn more. We can continuously experience more if we're willing to be open to it.
I just finished writing my book that's getting published next year. And I explain this whole concept in this analogy of keys. And throughout a lifetime, we accomplish, or we accumulate this set of keys. And the goal, for me at least, is that by the time I'm old and gray, I have this massive ring and it has all of these keys attached to it. Imagine it's like one of those old
janitor closet
keys. Yes. Hangs by your pants in the little
It makes a little noise every time you take a step. Yeah.
And I imagine that with every hard goal that I set, every race, for example, every business milestone, every season I go into, I set these goals not because I'm a race junkie, but because I want to find and accumulate another key that unlocks a new part of my life. And it always does. Like every prep I ever go into, maybe because it's the amount of solitude that you have in these big endurance preps and training sessions, and the discipline and the commitment that's required, I find out something new about myself. I find out something new about other people, and I gain new perspectives and ideas and opinions. Because often during these big preps, I'm reading a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm evolving. And with each prep that is done, I see it as prep is done, event, competition, race is accomplished. I get my bib, I get my medal. I typically throw those in the trash. But what I'm getting is this key. And this key unlocks this new part of my mind, part of my ability, part of my life. So that's why I keep signing up for these things and pushing myself, because I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to accumulate more keys. So by the time I'm old and gray, like I said, I've now have the ability to unlock all these different parts of my life that I wouldn't have had the ability to if I wouldn't have pushed. Mm-hmm. That's why I keep pushing so hard.
Absolutely. And I think, especially with like we had talked about with developing a community and sharing your story publicly, those keys not only are helping you open those doors where you have those reflections on how hard you worked, but they're opening the door for other people and showing that one, this is possible, but two, the steps you can take. Obviously, it's going to be different. Everyone's life is different. Everyone's journey is different, but you are providing individuals with a pathway of, okay, if I want to accomplish this, what have other individuals who have done it before me done? How can I find inspiration in these people that have done these races or who have started these businesses? Like you said, you're always listening to the Founders Podcast because it goes over how individuals have developed themselves to be these people that others look up to and say, hey, if I want to do something similar, how did they accomplish it? How did they accomplish it? What can I derive from their individual experiences to then build out my own life story? So those keys, whether you realize it or not, are unlocking doors for other individuals as well. And I think that aligns a lot with me in realizing that for what I'm doing, it's showing that you can be still in college or fresh out of college and just, if you want to, you just work for it and you try your absolute hardest. And if it's intended to, it will work out. And similar for you, it's just individuals that have been in the army or who have been through school or who are dads now. It's not necessarily just Nick's life. It's how can I look towards Nick's life to find motivation to have it change my own life?
Yeah, it's powerful. So let's talk about Ironman. Let's talk about prep. You know, we've been talking a lot about preparation. What did you learn through an Ironman preparation? Like, how long was the prep? What was it like? What were some of the keys you created and unlocked that allowed you to do what you did?
Yeah, so the prep itself, I want to say I truly started training for it midway through April. I was still at USC. I had gotten my first bike. I got a trainer. I started going to the USC rec center to swim. Prior to getting the bike, I would ride the stationary bike for 2.5 hours and everyone would look at me like I was a crazy person.
Actually, I remember you posting that and I was like, why are you on that bike?
Ironman prep, man. That's what it was all about.
That's commitment.
I like to work hard for things, but yeah, it was funny because I realized very early on in riding that stationary bike for 2.5 hours that it was going to be very uncomfortable to train for an Ironman just due to the length of the event itself. Even the fastest half Ironman right now is above 3.5 hours. So regardless of how hard you are working, it's going to be a mental and physical test of longevity. So that was one of the big lessons that I continue to remind myself, that during these long bike rides, these long runs, the swim sessions where you do countless laps back and forth, that it's supposed to be uncomfortable and it's supposed to take a while. There's never going to be a day where I suddenly run 20 miles in 10 minutes. You know, it's always going to be a commitment. So that was one of the big lessons that I learned early on. The second big lesson that I learned, which I think really aligns with what BPN is trying to guide other athletes to right now, is that you have to fuel for performance. It is the fourth discipline to Ironman, really. It's the swim, the bike, the run, and then nutrition. So learning what works best for yourself and continuously improving upon that. I started out for my half Ironman, I think I consumed a little under 50 grams of carbs per hour over the whole bike, which I quickly learned that was going to mess up my run because I was under fueling. So what I did with that was then I slowly ramped up my fueling over time with my longer bike sessions. And for the full Ironman, I was consuming 100 grams of carbs per hour, nearly double what I consumed in the half. And in turn, I think that helped me to have a pretty okay bike split in the full Ironman, regardless of it being a hard course. So that was the second biggest thing. And that translates over to sodium intake with how much you're sweating, especially in the Texas heat here. That was a big environmental change that I had to learn. But sodium intake, carb intake, and then outside of the like intra workout fueling, just recovery. So essential amino acids, making sure that you're consuming enough protein. Your body's a furnace. And especially when you're working really hard, you are burning a significant amount of calories. So gone were the days of me eating like a Cliff Bar up until noon and then having my first meal was from the minute I wake up, I needed to be dialed in with my nutrition if I wanted to see improvements in my workouts. And I think the last big lesson that I learned was the idea of being intentional versus taking things too seriously. I knew that Ironman prep was going to be all involved. I knew I was going to have to dedicate a lot of time to it. I think in the final month leading up to my race, 5 weeks out of the 6 weeks, month and a half, I had trained for over 25 hours in those weeks. So I knew that I had to be very intentional with when my workouts were, what I was consuming my meals around, but I didn't want to take things too seriously to the point that I lost enjoyment with what I was doing. I made a conscious effort to remind myself that, hey, I made the decision to sign up for this event. Nobody forced me to sign up for an Ironman. I said, this is something that I want to do, not only for myself, but to show other individuals that, hey, this is possible if you work for it. So when the workouts do get tough, you have to remind yourself what you're doing it for. Because if you go into every single workout with just the serious composure and idea that if the workout doesn't go exactly how it's planned to, it's a failure, there's no growth opportunity there. If I didn't hit every single split, or if I didn't go the exact distance I wanted to, I would have gotten so frustrated with myself, and I would have lost the enjoyment with training for the race itself, maybe even pulled out of it entirely. But I made that conscious effort to remind myself, hey, keep showing up for you. Keep showing up because others are showing up just because you are too. And being intentional with my training, making sure I was still training very hard, but not taking it too serious. I think that was the big lesson that reminded me, hey, you have control over your life. No one's forcing you to live it the way that you're living it. So why not enjoy it?
Those are all really good points. That last one's really good. Made me think of this morning. So I had a 10-mile workout this morning. It was 1 mile easy, and then 3 sets, 2 miles hard, 1 mile easy. And those 2 miles hard, I was shooting for like a 5:55 pace. Alarm clock went off this morning, 4:30. Woke up tired because we're still feeding Nico throughout the night right now. So I gave him his bottle between 2 and 3, went back to bed for an hour and a half. Woke up, slugged my GM Sport, go out the door, start running, 1 mile warm up, and then it's time to turn it on. I'm thinking like half mile in, all right, in a half mile, like 3.5 minutes, I gotta turn this on. And it's like 5:05 a.m. at this point. I'm like, man, I don't feel like turning it on right now. And then it just like clicked to me. I was thinking, no one's making me do this workout. I created this workout on my own. I get to do this workout. Dude, let's send it. And then I just went and sent it, and I was loving it. But it was such a quick perspective change that went from me being like, oh, I gotta do this, to, hold on, I created this workout on my own. No one knows I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Dude, let's go. But just having that, like making it fun again and realizing you're in the driver's seat, you're in control, gives you all the ability.
As soon as you make that switch from I have to do this to I get to do this, just the entire narrative shifts in a much more positive direction.
Yeah.
Because like you said, no one was out there filming you this morning. No one was out there waiting for you to post your watch split. Like, oh, did Nick hit the workout? You said it was like, no, I made this workout for myself. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. You can make your life whatever you want it to be because it is your life. You just have to show up and work for it.
Going back to fueling, as you previously mentioned, you know, before my first Ironman, I didn't understand fueling. So I believe that a lot of people who have done larger endurance races, ultra marathons, definitely Ironman triathlons, you really learn and understand the importance of proper fueling because you can't make it through without it. You know, before I really learned how to fuel properly, I was the same way. Like, yeah, I'm gonna grab some electrolytes, a zero calorie, zero sugar Gatorade. Like that's all I need. And I quickly realized, oh crap, like this ain't gonna cut it. I'm bonking every workout. So now it's not necessarily like what's the minimum amount of carbs I need? how much can I get without getting sick? How many carbs, how many electrolytes can I force into my body to maximize performance? Because that not only helps that training session, but recovery as well. So I would argue that a lot of people who don't understand proper fueling for endurance haven't done an endurance event long enough where you need it or you learn how powerful it can be.
I think I agree with that. And I think also with considering nutrition, it's the idea of the way in which you progress in your nutrition intake is similar to the way in which you progress in the workout itself. If you go out and just try and run an all-out mile right away, you're going to burn out and it's going to be a lot more taxing. Similarly, if you do a workout entirely fasted, or if, for me at least, after learning about, okay, I can consume a lot more carbs on the bike to provide me with sufficient enough fuel, I was like, okay, I'm going to immediately ramp up my carb intake and do super well. And it took me meeting with my coach, an individual that knew a lot more than me, Parker Kurth, to tell me, you have to incrementally progress over time in order to get the most out of what you're consuming, because your body has to get used to being able to break down that fuel source, convert it into glucose, which is like your body's sufficient enough energy source, to then use it in a proper way. It's not just about how much can I consume in this short period of time, or how it's what works best for you and your body. Similar to the workouts, it's not necessarily how fast can I run in this particular time. It's how do I progress in my running over time? How do I progress in my biking? How do I progress in my lifting? And then how do I have my fueling thus complement the effort that I'm doing? So like you said, with individuals might not understanding the importance of nutrition in correlation to performance because they haven't performed an event long enough, they might not have progressed to that point yet in which nutrition becomes a definite factor. Yeah. Because for a while we did have that narrative of fasted running and how that increases fat burn. But really what that happens is when you sleep at night, you replenish your glycogen storage, which is your body's energy source, or your energy storage. And then as you start to work out, as you start to simply live, your body converts that glycogen into glucose. Glucose is the energy source for both your muscles and the brain. This is just very basic biology. Please don't correct me. I studied neuroscience, so I feel like I can understand, or I can explain that. But if you work out fasted or without sufficient enough glycogen, if you don't have sufficient enough fuel, you very quickly deplete that storage. You get fatigued after the runs, after the workouts. You feel significantly more tired than usual. Whereas if you understand how supplementing in that additional carbohydrate mix or that oat bar or whatever that carb source is that you're using is just going to help to like top off that storage, so that when you start working out, you're not necessarily immediately forcing your body to then break down that stored glycogen that you spent recovering during your sleep. But it's just like, no, we have this additional fuel source that we can work with. You then are able to increase your performance at that exceptional level for a longer period of time.
Yeah, there was this narrative a few years ago, and I think it's still around, where there was a lot of hype behind the fat adapted endurance athlete. And there's benefit of being a fat adapted athlete if your intensity is at an extremely low rate. So if I'm doing zone 2, essentially walking or hiking, you might not need carbohydrates if you are fat adapted. Say like you're on a ketogenic diet, for example. So people automatically assume that would correlate to high performance athletes and individuals. But as intensity increases, as paces become faster, effort is greater, you require more carbohydrates, and being fat adapted isn't necessarily beneficial any longer. And then I do love the fact that you brought up, you kind of have to slowly incrementally increase your fueling capacity. Similar to the way if you aren't running at all and you go out and you start logging 30 to 40 miles a week from zero, you're going to get injured because your body hasn't adapted to that stimulus. You're going to get injured. You're going to get hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to recover appropriately. Same with fueling is you have to train your gut in the same way that you train your muscles. And your stomach isn't going to be able to handle that much fuel before or during that training event because it's not used to it. Now, that's honestly one of the reasons we formulated G1M Sport with cluster dextrin. I actually just sat down with the cluster dextrin team 2 weeks ago to look over some new studies and research. But what attracted me to cluster dextrin as a primary carb source for G1M Sport in the beginning was that cluster dextrin has a high molecular weight, especially compared to glucose, or dextrose, which means that it moves through the digestive tract very quickly. It's extremely fast gastric emptying, so you don't get stomach discomfort, gas, bloating, belching like you would with some other carbohydrate source. So it's the high molecular weight, the fast gastric emptying that truly makes cluster dextrin so unique as a carb source.
That's pretty cool. I didn't learn anything about that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I think one thing that I wanted to say was what we were talking about with progressive overload, and from a fueling perspective and from a workout perspective, it also stems to some of the earlier points we had touched on with just making positive change in your life. If you decide that you want to start this new business right away, it's not necessarily a matter of just quitting my job right away and just going right into it all head first. Like, yes, but you have to do so. If you want to make change, you have to do it in a progressive, incremental manner. It's not just this sudden shift where your whole world is upside down and then you're suddenly trying to stay afloat. It's no, like, how do I make progress over time in order to achieve my goals? How do I slowly increase my running mileage over time to achieve my goals? How do I increase my fueling to match my individual needs over time to meet my goal? How do I change my life incrementally over time to meet my goals? I think that's the big narrative that I learned, especially with Ironman training, with the 3 different disciplines. It's not a matter of every single day I'm going to swim as far as I can, bike as far as I can, and run as far as I can. It's you're going to have these days where one is a priority. You're going to have these days where the other 2 get to, shift with what gets to go first, what gets to go second. Everything in life is just about incremental progressions, and that just emphasizes the point of consistency and just continuously showing up every single day, which I think is truly embodied in a dedicated prep to a race, or a dedicated prep to a plan for a presentation or for a pitch for a business. It's how willing are you to continue to keep working at something, and even if it just means micro progressions or micro, increases over time.
That segues pretty well into this next thing I wanted to get your thoughts on. Going back to the podcast I listened to this past weekend with Alex Hormozi and Chris Williamson. Alex Hormozi was talking about how he views himself as a maximizer as opposed to an optimizer. And he was kind of, I don't say dogging, but he was highlighting the fact that there's like all these people out there that are just focused on optimizing their life. They're biohacking. Everything has to be optimized. Their like morning routine takes 3 hours. Their nighttime routine takes 3 hours. They don't have this certain light for their bedroom. They can't sleep there. Like living this fully optimized life where you're not actually like even living any longer. You have all these routines and rhythms baked in that allow you to live in this safe place with the hopes of living 5 additional years. So it's quantity over quality. He views himself as this maximizer where he's just trying to get shit done. And, I did some research on this then afterwards because like there's got to be people talking about the difference between a maximizer and an optimizer. We can apply this to training. We can apply this to life. And I'm kind of on the fence in between the two. And I think there's times in our life where we should be a maximizer. There's times and seasons where we should be an optimizer. A maximizer is a point where a function's value is at its greatest, while an optimizer is an algorithm that maximizes production efficiency. To maximize is about raw return. To optimize is return on investment. What are your thoughts on that?
Immediately when you share the idea of maximizing versus optimizing, it made me think of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, because he talked about the difference between being efficient versus being effective, where an individual could be very efficient and get done 20 tasks in a day, but two of them could have been actually pivotal or of like great importance. But they were busy the whole day. They got everything they wanted to done. Versus being effective is an individual that got 3 tasks done, but those 3 tasks were very important to them. And I think a maximizer is someone who works very effectively. They know what their big goals are. They know what they're trying to accomplish. That's what they stick to, as opposed to doing all the micro things that an optimizer or an efficient person might do, where yes, they're checking every little box and they have, like you said, on a quantity basis, they're accomplishing more, but on a quality basis, a maximizer is accomplishing more. What I truly think about is that, like you said, there are times in our life where we have to be a maximizer. We don't have the entire day to work with. We have 3 big goals that we have to get done that day, whether that be training, whether that be an important meeting. It's just external circumstances out of our control are forcing us to have a limited time period where we just have to be as effective as possible. Whereas when you have full control over your day and you have, say, a Saturday where it's just fully up to you, you can be as efficient as you want because you are allotted that time to work with. So I think, like you said, yes, if you want to be a very effective maximizer, that could be a result of just external constrictions on what you are capable of doing in that moment. If you want to be an efficient optimizer, that could just be a result of you having more time on your hand or less responsibilities at that immediate moment that you could prioritize the little things that you want to do, whether it be like reading a book or listening to a podcast. Whereas with an effective maximizer, it's I have to get my workout in, I got to get this meeting done, and then I got to take care of the kids. Like those are your big 3. So yeah, I think it's just like 2 different circumstances that you could be both of those individual roles. It just depends on like what's going on around you.
Yeah, I think about this kind of like you use one to do the other. So think about Ironman training, for example. And in the beginning, you're just getting started. You don't really know like where you should spend a lot of your time. So that optimization cycle is where you're just testing. Like for me, when I first started Ironman training, I realized I did all this testing. I did all these different workouts with a coach. And I realized, okay, on the bike where I'm getting a lot of gain is these long duration sessions where I'm just putting in the work, and these big gear workouts where it's like massive gear, intervals, they hurt, they burn, they're uncomfortable. And then on the run where I'm improving is just increasing volume over time and these key workouts being like a track workout, a tempo workout. So I kind of see optimizing as you take this big, broad net and you test and you see what's actually moving the needle, and you take those pieces, you pull them away, and you maximize time on those. So maybe optimizing and maximizing is like ebbs and flows where it's let's test, let's find, we found these are the things we're going to focus on, maximize every moment and every effort towards these things. Like right now, I'd say I'm in a season of maximizing. I'm not in a season of optimizing. There's a few things I'm focused on and working towards, and I'm just going to maximize the shit out of it.
And I think there's 2 different ways in which an individual could maximize. It could be you're solely focused on the things that you know are locked in or of sole importance, or you're focused on the things that you want to improve upon. So like, for example, you talked a lot in your Ironman training block right there, where just like the big gear workouts and the long runs. What about, the longer bike sessions that are more so just about getting time on the bike, or quicker speed sessions for the running? You could technically still be a maximizer by focusing on the things that you aren't necessarily the best at, because it's just a matter of where you're directing your attention and energy towards. That's what I think an optimizer versus a maximizer. It's not necessarily about just doing the things that you're good at or just sticking to the big things that need to improve, or it's about thinking about the things that you need to improve upon. So there's like 2 different ways in which you can maximize, which I think is pretty cool.
That's actually a really good point. You can maximize your strengths to like make incremental progress, or you can maximize on your weaknesses to improve upon those. That's why the way I like programming my training, depending on what I'm prepping for, like right now with High Rocks, there's a lot of different facets of training. So I kind of have these areas of focus where I'm maximizing time. 1 week might be a running maximized week. 1 week might be a strength maximized week. 1 week might be a like, High Rock simulation circuit maximized week. Sometimes those are my strengths that I'm incrementally trying to improve. Sometimes these are weaknesses that I need to actually get better in. But I like that train of thought between maximizing. Yeah. Smart.
And it's similar to like using High Rocks as an example. You could have a very efficient High Rocks workout where you're doing pretty much every single event that you're going to be tested in, or you could have a very effective High Rocks workout in which you're working on either 3 of your strengths or 3 of your weaknesses. Either or, you're seeing progress. It's just 2 different formats. So that idea of being efficient and effective, or an optimizer versus a maximizer, you can be both. It's just not necessarily at the same time. It's 2 different roles for 2 different experiences.
Yeah, true. Well, Luke, it was a pleasure. Huge congrats on the massive accomplishment.
Thank you.
Can't wait to support you in this next race. Thanks for putting a new chain on my bike.
I was going to say, man, anytime you want it back, she's yours.
No, dude. Someone's got to put that thing to use. Years down the road when I take over another Ironman, I'll ask you for it back. But until then,
hopefully I'll have my own bike by then.
Until then, I want you to keep ripping on it.
Thank you. I will.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Of course. Appreciate you.